Hi, it's Dr. Parikh, and today we're talking about avoiding plagiarism. And that may seem like something that's really easy to do, like, oh, just don't buy a paper online, or just don't take a quote without citing it properly, or just don't plagiarize from a sample paper or my friend's paper. The first one's pretty easy. Don't go buying papers. It's just not a great idea. Some of the others, though, can get tricky because how do you cite properly? I've had students who tell me, I thought that I was okay because I included a citation. I didn't know I didn't know I needed to do quotation marks too. I had so many students say that I actually reached out to Mary Ladani in the Writing Center to say, is this some MLA rule that I don't know about? And she said, no, not at all. You always use quotation marks if you're doing a word for word copy. And it may seem obvious, don't copy from the sample paper, but it's tough because I give you sample papers to give you ideas of what to write. So how close can you get without it being plagiarism? Especially, sometimes topic sentences to say there were several limitations in these studies. How many ways are there to say that? So learning how to write with academic integrity is trickier than it may seem, especially for students who haven't done a lot of writing in high school. So we hit this topic really hard the first week, but it continues throughout. So the first week we do a few different things. What I actually recommend you do first, even though it's due later technically, is the Caldwell University Library's plagiarism tutorial. So one of our librarians put together this tutorial, and it takes, students say, like 20 to 30 minutes to do, and then you go back into Blackboard and you write just a couple bullet points telling me what stood out to you. What did you learn? What did you find interesting? I always include a couple questions to help you think of what sorts of things to say. So you go through, parts of it have audio, so make sure you have headphones or can play audio. And this tutorial covers a lot of the details of plagiarism. Another thing that you do the first week is the quiz that I've put together. This is one of the few assignments that you will do over and over until I'm happy, because I really hate having to write reports later. So when in a final assignment, if there is, I'm going to sneeze. Sorry, these are the moments that you really wish that I edited these videos. I hate writing these reports, but I do them. If there is plagiarism in a final paper, I almost always write a report to the university. There's a few reasons. One is if it's the first time it's happened, it's not really that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. You get a 0 for the assignment, which is what most professors do when there's plagiarism anyway. And there's sort of a letter in your file, maybe, something like that. If it happens more than one time, that's when consequences start piling up. I'm okay with that because it leaves it to where, you could make an honest mistake. And yes, it'll pull your grade down for this class. If you've done everything else pretty well along the line, it's unlikely to change whether you pass the class or not. And then it doesn't really affect much else. So honest mistakes, you're not completely hung out to dry. But my concern is students who repeatedly claim that things are honest mistakes in class after class after class, because if all that happens is maybe you get a lower grade in the class, then it's pretty tempting. It kind of makes sense to just see if the plagiarism works. So that is why I am very consistent about reporting plagiarism to the university. It's summer 2019. I went 2 semesters in a row without having to write any plagiarism reports, which was really exciting. And I brought in cookies. It's at the very end of the semester, but I email all of my classes, including my online class, and say, hey, I finished grading papers. Nobody had plagiarism. Nobody had a plagiarism report. Feel free to stop by and claim your non-plagiarism cookies. That's how much I care about plagiarism and how Midwestern I am. I bring in cookies. I always mean to bake them, but it's always the end of the semester and I'm sick, so I buy them from Costco instead. So I report plagiarism. I take it really seriously. And the plagiarism quiz, I have you retake it until I'm confident that you are clear, you can clearly express 3 different pieces of plagiarism. So let's see where that quiz is. There's always multiple ways to get there, so you could go through the weekly modules, but I'm going to take you directly to the APA quizzes. APA quiz 1. I'm not going to worry too much about the multiple choice questions because you'll get the answers to that, so you'll see if you're right or wrong on those. But I'm going to talk about the essay question. So there's 3 pieces, and I highly recommend that in your answer you actually go 1, 2, 3. Sorry if my laptop shakes a little. So first, copying directly from the source. So not using quotation marks or a citation when copying directly. That's essentially what I want to see. I want to see you say that if you, so it would be plagiarism can be, or sure, I'll say is. It's a terrible sentence, but it'll do. So I want you to say, or you could, on the other hand, you could say, if you want to copy directly from a source, you need to use quotation marks and a citation. The citation actually needs a page number, but that I consider to be more of a detail. I don't consider that an essential, that's style, that's not avoiding plagiarism. But if you don't use quotation marks or don't include any kind of citation, at that point, it's not style, it's about integrity. So the second one, change the word slightly. Plagiarism is also changing some words, but not changing the sentence structure. So if you use exactly these words, I'm going to have concerns because the whole point of this is to see if you know it well enough to put it into your own words. Because if you don't know how to put it into different words, that tells me you don't really get what I'm saying, which is a problem. People who don't understand these things go on to plagiarize and get zeros and get reported. So plagiarism, we often think of word for word plagiarism, which is number 1, but there's also paraphrasing plagiarism, which is where you are changing some of the words you're trying to paraphrase, but you're not doing it very well. So you change a couple words, maybe you use the thesaurus function, maybe you actually do know enough to change the words, but you leave the sentence pretty much the same. This happens most often when you are trying to just take one sentence out of the paper and put it in your own words. That is incredibly difficult to do. I know because I often ask students if they want help paraphrasing something, and when they give me one sentence to do it with, I have a really hard time doing it well. What's much, much easier is to take a whole paragraph and try to summarize 1 or 2 main ideas from it. Even then, you want to try to sort of switch the tone a little or somehow change it from the original paragraph, but at least then you're not doing an exact sentence. Number 3 is not using in-text citations or references. Even if you completely change the words, you still need to cite where the idea came from. So even if you have done a beautiful job of rewording it, sometimes students think, well, I'm not using their words, so I don't have to give them credit. That is a falsehood. In fact, in science, you want to give them credit. I don't care what you think in this setting, in this writing. I don't care what your opinion is. I care what evidence you have. Now, what's interesting is the way you pull that evidence together. It's the way you use topic sentences. It's the way you organize things. It's what you draw out from the evidence. But I only care about it because somebody did the research and found the support. I don't expect you to know these things off the top of your head. And when I write, people don't care about my opinions either. When Dr. Sitnick or Dr. Botras or Dr. Ling or anyone doing research writes, people don't care about their opinions. They care about either what they can pull from other people's research which is the literature review or introduction with citations, or what their research was, what their data is, which is the main part of the article. I apologize if you can hear my printer going in the background. So citations are not a bad thing. Most of your paper should be cited in a scientific paper. It's not an opinion piece. It is you're like a lawyer. I don't care what you think as a lawyer. I care what evidence you can pull together. So your citations are actually your power in this situation. So there's 3 parts of plagiarism, just to go over it again. First, if you are quoting word for word, which, by the way, you shouldn't do very often. Very rarely do you need a word for word quote. Often when students are using a lot of quotes, there's 2 reasons. 1, they're lazy. 2, they're not confident. Lazy, whatever, just deal with it. But confidence, often these students, they will follow up a quote with their own rephrasing of the idea, and I'll tell them, just include the rephrasing. Just put a citation on it, and it'll be fine. Number 2, plagiarism is also when you change some words, but don't change the sentence structure. This happens most often when students don't really understand what's being written. Either they just haven't taken the time to read it as deeply as they need to, or they don't really have the skills yet. Reading journal articles is hard. It takes me a lot of focus, and it takes me 1.5 to 2 hours to read a journal article and really understand it. And that's if it's something that I'm fairly familiar with. These things take a lot of time and effort, especially at first. This is one of the reasons that I have started sending students to the Writing Center so early, because I think it's important to have that support, to make sure that someone is there to help you learn how to read for comprehension for this type of writing, and then also think about how do you actually put it into your own words. I want to start building those skills and catching those mistakes at the beginning rather than having a bunch of final papers get plagiarism reports. Another reason that plagiarism happens at the number 2 level, where you're changing some words but not really putting it into your own words, just switching out a few key words for synonyms. It also happens because people are just strapped for time. They've waited until the last minute, and they just got to get something out. So that's one of the reasons I break these assignments up so much, because I force you to spread it out over time. I know it's very much an ideal situation. Almost nobody's going to spread their assignments out this much in real life, but I want you to at least get an experience of what it's like to be forced to do it. I always have 1 or 2 students who really, really struggle with being forced to break things down over time. And if you really wanted, you could just sit down and write your draft of your paper and then kind of walk everything back. Figure out, okay, so, let me pull out my outline to see how it fits. Let me then, from my outline, I'll pull my paraphrases. If you want to work backwards, that's fine. But the vast majority of students really appreciate being pushed to break things down and to do things slowly over time. The last one, even if you change the words, you still have to cite. That's usually students just don't understand the rules. They don't understand how scientific citation works. When you're reading your journal articles, notice how often they cite. It's really often in the introduction where they're talking about other people's work. And then you get to the method section, the results section, they don't cite as often because they're talking about their own work. They're still citing when they talk about measures that other people have developed or research techniques that other people have developed, but it's fewer citations. The discussion section usually gets some more because now they're tying it back into existing literature. So saying how this study fits with the study in theory that's gone before. But if you notice, there's a lot of citations. That's how we write in science. So that's the plagiarism quiz. I want you to write some version of these, and for this assignment, I will give you very detailed feedback. I usually will put it sort of, when you get it back, if you have anything less than 10 out of 10, look for feedback. There will be feedback. unless you happen to just miss a multiple choice one, in which case there will be feedback that way too. Sometimes I'll even email just to make sure people see it because it's so time sensitive and I really want to make sure that it gets done. So you may see an email with the same feedback that I put into Blackboard. So this plagiarism quiz is one of my best tools for making sure students understand plagiarism. The other thing I will do to help with that is your paraphrasing writing sample. I'll talk more about that in a video for Module 2, but the idea is that early on I want to check to see if you share my understanding of what it means to paraphrase effectively, and to make sure that you have the basic skills you need. So that takes up a good bit of next week. And again, I'm trying to move a lot of these checks earlier. Now, sometimes things still slip through. Sometimes I think it's your writing and it's not. And in a final paper, I might still notice something. And even if I haven't, even if that sentence has been in several assignments, just because Safe Assign doesn't pick it up or I don't notice it, doesn't mean that it can't still be caught as plagiarism later on. So what I mean is, usually in earlier assignments, like if in your article notes, I notice that there's plagiarism, usually I can either have you redo it or just take off a bunch of points for that assignment, but say, just fix it going forward. Now, if it shows up in any more assignments, I will typically write a report then. But if it's early on in the class, usually I just work with students to teach. If it's in a final paper, even if it's been present and I just haven't noticed it, I hold a higher level of accountability for final papers. And so almost any plagiarism that's in a final paper is going to get a report. I know that can be frustrating, but I really encourage you, if you have questions about whether something is plagiarism or not, don't try to hide it or see if you can pass it by. Come to me. Come to office hours or email me. You're always welcome to email me and say, all right, here's the original paragraph. Here's my paraphrase. Are these different enough? And here's the thing. Often, I'm going to give you 2 or 3 examples back. If it's too close, I'm going to say, okay, here's a couple ways you could write it. And you could just take one of those. It's my gift to you. Because I think that one of the best ways to learn proper writing is to see it demonstrated. Now, of course, if you're sending me, 20 of these emails, I'm probably going to push back. But 1 or 2, I am more than happy to help work through that. And I also try to build in peer review opportunities where you can do that sort of like, okay, help me figure out if this is too close. You can also always use the Writing Center to help you. And again, one of the reasons I have you go so early in the semester is so if you realize that you do need a lot of help, you have plenty of time to get that help early on. Plagiarism. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I've missed. Safe Assign is a tool that's helpful, but it's not 100%. It's still just a tool. It's a dumb tool. It highlights portions that it thinks are similar to other things that it's seen. Even if we submit your article, it might not match the 2 up. And it may highlight a bunch of, so citations almost always, citations and references almost always get picked up as being similar to existing stuff. So you may have a really high percentage that means nothing because it's just common phrases that it's picking up or these citations and references. You may have blatant plagiarism and have a very low score. So Safe Assign is a tool. I do use it, but don't freak out if your percentage is high and don't assume that you're good if your percentage is low. Really work to develop the tools to understand what good writing is. I think that's all I have to say about plagiarism for now. As I said, it's something that's going to come up again in the Paraphrase writing sample because the whole purpose of that is to give you direct early feedback from the Writing Center, your peers, and me about how well you're paraphrasing. But I want to just emphasize again, plagiarism is something I take very seriously and I hold students to high standards And I also work hard to give you opportunities to learn and improve during the semester. Thanks for watching. Bye.